Welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou, and this is the podcast where we aim to help recruiters, founders, managers, business owners get 1% better after every single episode. Every episode is unfiltered, unedited, uncensored, where we just have a free-flowing back and forth conversation with the aim to add tactics, tools, techniques, anecdotes, war stories, all in the hopes for you guys to get 1% better after every episode. It would mean the world to me if you could like, comment, subscribe, follow the podcast on all the channels that you view this on. We have a newsletter as well on LinkedIn if you could go and follow and subscribe onto that as well so you don't miss any episode. And if you find this or any of the other episodes enjoyable, please share them with your friends, your colleagues, and anyone that you think could benefit from it. Enough from me, let's get into today's episode. Hello everybody and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host Charles Kiriakou. Today I'm joined by Dani and Kate from Barkley Ellis Talent Solutions, and we've got a massive episode for you guys today. We've got so many topics, and before I go through those topics, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask them to introduce themselves. So either one of you, if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then again, and then we'll go through the topics.
Well, hi, I'm Kate. So I've actually worked in recruitment for 10 years, which is very, very scary. Started off as a 360 recruiter in agency, then moved to a TA role. So I've worked for some quite big brands, Opus, Nexus Search, JCW. I also worked for a rec-to-rec called Madison Warner before moving back into TA at Opus. Year after being in back in TA for about 6 years. Dani and I set up this year our own rec in Jan.
Yeah. And hi, I'm Dani-Louise. I've been in recruitment for just over 10 years as well, which again is petrifying to think about. I've worked for some really big brands. I started off in rec, so I did 2 years in rec, then moved internal for one of my clients and pretty much stayed in internal until now. So it's been a change coming back to the rec side, but I know all things TA, process and all of that stuff. So that's a bit more about me.
Nice one. I appreciate that, guys. It takes a certain breed of individual to want to do rec, if I'm honest. Like, there are definitely easier industries to work in recruitment, so fair play to you. In terms of the topics that we're looking to discuss today, we're going to dive into working candidates versus working clients and the importance of relationships. As I mentioned to the guys before we click recording, there's a few people on LinkedIn that, you hear relationships and they're like, oh, right, relationships. Personally, I think that's the whole thing of recruitment, but we're going to get into more detail about that. We'll talk about different markets. And obviously with your guys' experience doing rec and me working external with a lot of businesses, hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of value about what it's like working in, say, finance, rec, sales, whatever it might be. We'll have a conversation around D&I, and I know Dani-Louise, is extremely passionate about this topic, and I might have some conflicting opinions. I might agree with her, so tune in for that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the way TAs are treated in recruitment as well. I know we mentioned before we recorded Louise Gilmer, who was one of the first guests. We spoke a lot about that, so I think it'd be really interesting to get your guys' opinion and kind of experience on what that's been like for yourselves. So I guess the first thing to dive into then is working candidates versus working jobs. So either and or both of you, just tell me a little bit about kind of what you mean by that.
I think when we first set up, so we like the first 2 weeks, we're like, oh, okay, like we're just going to focus on getting clients on, getting jobs on. And that was our like core focus. We've recruited for in the past and things like that. In rec, I mean, the biggest difference is you work a candidate. If you have a good candidate, you will place your candidate. You can ring up pretty much any business, can't you? And place a good candidate. So you need to have relationships and you need to go out and get the jobs. But to be fair, I think that was one of the early mistakes that we could have made. We could have just started finding candidates from day one, because
Yeah, because it was really overwhelming, to be fair. Like the amount of clients that like jumped on us as soon as we launched, like it was really like, obviously for us it was really like nice, and it was like people we hadn't spoken to in years. Like I reconnected with someone that I've not spoken to in probably like 7 years, and they're obviously a business owner. So like in that way it was like that spoke a lot of volume for us, in the sense of where you were mentioning about relationships, because they've obviously known us for that amount of time. They've then encouraged our new business journey, so that was obviously really flattering for us. But then it was like, realistically, when we get a good candidate, we're going to work the candidate. Yes, we can be market agnostic and we can focus purely on when we're searching. We might tailor our search to being more data led or whatever it might be. But its principle is that we always work our good candidates, rather than being like, right, this is the role that I have, this is what I need to look for. Unless, of course, we're on a retainer, then it's a different story. But obviously, from like a contingent perspective, rec to rec is very candidate led. So it makes more sense to work a candidate rather than a job.
And I think like it's still important to go and meet businesses and do that job focus, because when you have a good candidate on, you want to make sure you've got the most opportunities to be able to sell them good opportunities and good businesses, and be able to understand those businesses inside out. So that is why it's still worth going and reconnecting with all these clients, so that you can't, you know, like you can give specifics, like you can be like, right, I've actually met this client, this is what they're like, you know, blah de blah de blah. And so I do think it's really, really important, but ultimately the candidate is going to come first.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask a couple of things on that. The first thing I was going to ask about, and we'll come back through this in a second, some markets are a lot more candidate orientated, right? So when I built my desk in medical devices, I didn't really do an awful lot of spec-outs. I mainly worked jobs because, again, I similar to what you were saying, I mainly worked on a retained basis, exclusive basis, and I searched the market to find like the needle in the haystack type of candidate. So I'd be interested to understand, seeing as you've worked in various markets, you recruit into various markets. My first question would be, you know, what markets, obviously rec to rec is very candidate led, and I want to dive into that in a second. What markets would you say from your experience? Because perhaps there might be someone that's thinking about changing market, or, you know, maybe they're looking to get into recruitment. What markets would you say are typically more candidate focused or, you know, job focused from your experience?
Tech's more job focused. Like everyone knows, like in tech, like especially contract tech, like everyone's fighting for jobs, aren't they? Because there's so many candidates. Although I have got a client, and I mean, I won't say who it is, but like they like Ruby in tech, like Opus did a lot of Ruby. So I am quite familiar with that market. Ruby in tech on the perm side was a lot more like candidate led, but tech in general is like, especially like contract, like you've got to find the jobs. Any contract market as well, like contract recruiters, that's job led. You've got to
massively
go out and find jobs. Exec search, I think, like when you're doing like that C-level stuff, like VP up to C-level,
you are working jobs because you need to find the right candidate, surely.
But if you get a good candidate, you can take them to market and win the job. So I'd say, exec's probably a bit of both. But I think if you get a really good candidate, like in a niche space, you know, like FMCG, automotive, manufacturing, you can lead that candidate to market. Obviously, I didn't do the market, but that's like from the recruiters I've recruited, those are kind of the opinions.
And I'd say from like my TA perspective, like when I've worked, say, like I used to work for a company that had like multiple brands and multiple different offerings. So if I was working for the tech part of the business, it was very much like I had a huge network, and it was very easy to just go after candidates and probably know people. But if I was working the more consultative side of the business and I was looking for client solutions or the consultancy, like SOW based people, like things like that, that was very much just constant headhunting, and was definitely more a case of working the job, because it was a very, very niche focused role and it had a particular type of person. Whereas quite a broad tech recruiter or finance recruiter is a very different approach. That would maybe say where it would differ.
And I've always said to people though, like whether it is more candidate focused or job focused, if you do have a good candidate, at the end of the day, that's the master key, right? That's the skeleton key that opens up all the doors. Because I say this to consultants all the time. Oh, Charles, this company isn't hiring. Okay, cool. You've got a phenomenal candidate that's an unreal fit. Yeah, but they're not hiring. I spoke to them 3 months ago. Well, why wouldn't you just call them up and just say, hey, this person's coming? you don't have to sell the candidate in. It isn't a hard sell. It's just making you aware this candidate's on the market. This is what the salaries are. This company offers that, just as an education piece. And largely, a lot of clients might even say, do you know what? We'll have a chat. Can't promise anything. That's not going on your pipeline spreadsheet, but it's a conversation. And sometimes, like, imagine making that phone call without the candidate. 9 times out of 10, if you haven't built the relationship, which is what we'll get onto shortly, what's in it for the client? Why should they be speaking to the recruiter? Most recruiters, as I'm sure you know, you've worked in big businesses, they don't add any value to those calls. They just call up, hello mate, when you're hiring. We're not. Okay, bye. Do you know what I mean?
Next. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Like, the thing is like, say for example, with Danny or I, like, literally before this call, I was WhatsApping a client and I was like, oh, I'm working with this person, their contract, their weekly GP. I haven't even sent the profile to the client. I'm just talking to him on WhatsApp. He's like, book him in on Friday. I'm like, do you want to know his name? He's like, just book him in, Kate. You know, that type of thing. And it's like, or for example, if you had like a German speaker in the renewables market, like literally, again, it's going to be 100% the same thing.
But I think that's where we've, like, obviously where we said earlier, like the first thing we did was go for the client side to make sure that we had the clients, we had the roles, and maybe we did it the wrong way round. But it's so good that a lot of these clients that we do have, like, we have got that trusted relationship with that we've had for such a long time. So they know they're not always going to hear from us, but they know that when they do, they're going to want to speak to the people that we want to put in front of them. And that's the sort of way that we work.
Yeah, I like that. Well, my second question was going to be, in terms of working candidates, and I really like what Kate, what you were saying there about the WhatsApping candidates, because it reminded me of when my sales director said to me, the minute you send a CV, you've lost all control, which initially, when you have been taught to send CVs to clients, that seems like a mental statement to make to a recruiter. Especially, I was a senior consultant at the time, working almost exclusively retained. I was like, that's mental. And then when he showed me the process he ran, which was, as you mentioned, WhatsApping the client saying, you can interview on these dates. Here's a little bit of a write-up about them, voice noting them, calling them and saying, right, can you interview this person on Friday? And then booking it in the diary and then attaching the CV in the diary invite, rather than sending it over email and then waiting for the client to come back to him with, yeah, he's okay or she's okay or not. So yeah, my main question then to you guys is, now you've kind of gone down the road of working candidates, taking them to market, because there's going to be a lot of people here that go, oh yeah, I do my e-shots. Yeah, I send out to thousands of people. I'm not a massive fan of that. So how do you guys typically work? If you've got a banging candidate, how do you work them in the market then?
I don't e-shot, but I would never, ever, and I'm like, sorry if I offend anyone in saying this, but I cannot stand the recruiters that are like, oh, I've got a great candidate, I'm going to spec them to everyone. Because then they shit on people. Sorry. Then they like...
You can swear, don't worry.
Okay, fine. But then they shit on people like us that are like, I try and be a lot more consultative. I want to understand what my candidate wants, what is going to actually benefit my candidate. Are they actually going to be good for that business? And I won't talk to them about any business that isn't right for them. I'll always tell them who I'm working with and have them some backup options. And it's their choice on who I send them to. And then if we need to relook at the market, and I always ask the question, like, who do you want to speak to? Like, what clients interest you? I might not work with them, but I'd be more than happy to jump on a call with them. Like, that's just how I would rather go to market for them rather than spec them.
I think with us, like, we'll give our candidate options, but we won't send them over 20 options, which I'd like. Yeah, everyone works differently, but like Danny and I have got a lot of relationships. We've both been doing it for 10 years. So we will say, look, from what you've told me, what you're looking for, this matches up to X, Y, Z. These are 4 options that I think you're really, really going to like, rather than you go on 10, especially if they're a passive candidate and they're working. These are 4 options. Let me know what you think of them. If you like them, we'll get you in front of them. That type of thing. And it's we don't do specking out, because that's the thing. Like, Danny and I might do 1 or 2 placements a month, but we would rather work like one good candidate than work a load of shit being honest. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot more like quality. Like, again, like Dan said, like, I might not send you a CV for 2 months, but when I've got a good candidate, I'm going to send it to you. But the options we will give them will be based on, we're not going to give you 20 clients to go. My job is to go out and find those clients and sell you what you want, like get a good understanding, build a relationship with you, and then be able to be like, right, this is what I think you're going to like. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go and speak to them.
Yeah, mate, that's when I transitioned from contract to perm back in 2016. This lady reached out to me, like just an in-mail, sorry, and I bit back because the market when I was doing nursing crashed. There was a new government policy which meant we couldn't go past a certain threshold for rates, etc. And I lost like 60 to 90 nurses overnight, right? And other agencies weren't making margins on them, but they were trying to retain them just in case government policy changed. So the sales director handled it so badly and was like, look, if you're not happy, mate, then go. But just remember, the grass ain't always greener, which is a term you hear in a lot of recruitment companies back in the day. And I was just like, all right, cool. So obviously, as a 2-year experienced recruiter, you're going to have loads of in-mails and messages from recruiters. And I messaged this lady called Heidi back because her message was super personalized. And we jumped on a call. And it was the first time a recruiter ever wanted to meet me. And I was like, you want to meet me? I was like, okay, cool. So we jumped on like a Skype at the time. It was fucking hell, that's ages ago now. Jumped on a Skype call with her.
Does Skype even exist anymore?
Do you know what I mean? I'm not even old and I'm showing my recruitment age. It's bad. But yeah, we jumped on a Skype call. And at the time, I was going through sometimes you deal with candidates and they're going through what we call the triple whammy, right? There's something bad in their personal life has happened, something bad in their like immediate relationship, and then work is going bad. Work was really bad. I was going to break up with my missus and my granddad died and he was like the patriarch of the family, right? So it's a lot going on. And she guided me through the entire process and really, really qualified my need. Didn't just say, right, you're a great candidate, you got great figures, I'm going to spec you out. She came back to me after meeting me and said, I've got 3 businesses that I think you're a super fit for, X, Y, Z. And I came back and I was like, Heidi, with all due respect, mate, you've done a great job, but I simply told you I don't want to commute into central London. I want something Hertfordshire based. She fucking battled. She did not back down. And she was just like, look, you are destined to work in the city. Why don't you just meet these guys? Is there any harm in having a conversation with them, see what the crack is? Obviously, I'd only worked in like the local market in like Hertfordshire, North London. So everyone is just of this. We talk about D&I. Although our office appeared to be very culturally diverse, everyone had the hive mindset. There was no difference of opinions. Went into London to meet the guys from Projectus. Immediately, I was like, oh my God, this business is. And we say this a lot with recruiters that sometimes they haven't been successful because they haven't found a home yet. I hadn't found the home in my career yet. I was in a business that was, I don't mind a bit of the cowboy element, but not 100% cowboy. So that when I got that job there, I was like, that for me was like the perfect analogy of a rector. And she didn't stop there, by the way. On my first week, I got a huge bouquet of flowers, a bottle of wine or champagne. I think it was like Prosecco or champagne at the time, with a handwritten card to say, I'd always knew you'd smash it. Keep in touch, blah, blah, blah. And we still keep in touch to this day. That was 8 fucking years ago. That for me, that made me go, do you know what? This is the industry I want to be in. Because if there are people like that out there, I can do that and I can help change people's lives. And she fucking changed my life, man.
Lovely.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I think like, especially on my side, especially with the when I do, I used to be queen of the trainees back in 2018, 2019. Like when I did Rec to Rec for Paul Kelpie, like I was absolutely smashing the trainees. I don't do as many because as you grow as a recruiter, your network grows with you. So my network is now obviously more like mid to experience level, but I do still dabble in the trainees now and again. I like to keep myself young and fresh. But if I work with a trainee, stop laughing. I mean, to be fair, I meet every candidate that I send out. So I'll meet them on Teams because I'm like, you can speak, everyone knows what it's like. You speak to someone on the phone and then you see them and you're just like, oh my God, like it's so different. So like every candidate I've sent out, like we would have, whether I've met them in a bar or I've met them on Teams, that kind of thing, we will meet everyone. And do you know what that does? Like time kills deals, as they say in recruitment. Like I had a situation recently where I spoke to a candidate and I was like, I need to meet you before I can send you out. I can't just speak to you on the phone. And he couldn't do that day. So I met him on the Teams the next day. And that cost me because another rec to rec sent him out to loads and loads of options. But for me to put you in front of my clients, I need to meet you first, whether it's Teams or face to face. And it's cost me because I haven't got as many options, but I feel confident sending him out and I can actually speak about him and go, this is what he's like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it does cost you, but I'd rather do that, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. That's all about keeping your standards high, and it will pay dividends in the future. I say that to recruiters all the time. We had a rule when I worked at Projectus that you can't send a candidate out unless you've met them. And initially, I was just like you said, time kills deals. I come from a contract space where everything was faxed over. Again, I'm showing my age here, but they would fax over documents, and you just ping them out to hospitals to work. But because we were hiring, similar to yourselves, we hired medical sales reps. It's a salesperson that's dealing with customers. If you haven't met them, like I met some candidates, they jumped on a video call, they're rolling a cigarette. And I'm like, mate, like, what the fuck? And I was like, well, they said an interview, you're working, it's just a recruiter. And I'm like, yeah, but when I went to go meet recruiters, I acted as if that was an interview because this person's fucking representing me. Like, what the things that go through people's minds are just absolutely mental. And I'm sure you've had it as well, because a lot of businesses, you have to do like a presentation. You jump on a video call and you can only see like that part of their head. And you're like, what's going on? Then they put it down. You look at their backdrop and there's fucking rubbish everywhere and all the rest of it. And you're like, mate, you've got a presentation in the morning. Like, is this where you're going to do it? And it's like, yeah. Then a crying baby comes through and a dog's like chewing the sofa. And you're like, mate, so if you don't get on those prep calls and meet your candidates and stuff, it's pain. It is.
I never forget when we did in COVID an assessment centre online with about 30 graduates, and we were doing like the feedback sessions and we had breakout rooms. And I won't say his name, I still remember his name to this day. And he was just waiting for the feedback with a vape in his hand.
Oh no.
There was another guy, and it
God.
just made me think of it. He was telling me like in his interview, like on Teams, how he was so organised and he was so disciplined. And this was probably me being a bit like cocky back in the day, because I'm a lot more empathetic nowadays to what I was. I was very bullish back then. I'm a lot more empathetic now. And he hadn't made his bed. And I was like, mate, like I was like, if you haven't made
that's
your
such
bed,
a red flag for me.
I said, how are you telling me you're hardworking, you're determined, you're organised? I was like, you haven't even made your bed for an interview. And I'll never forget that. Sorry, that was really off topic. But
I mean, it's a valid point, though. It is a valid point. That, like, I'm going to have to find the quote now and I'll send it on separately. It doesn't need to be part of this. But my uncle actually told me a quote once, and it was something to do about the first thing you do in making your bed in the morning. And I honestly, I will not function. Like, I can't function in the morning unless my house is organised. And obviously, being a mum and things like that, my house is never always fully organised. But I will not be able to sit down at my desk unless my house is completely where it needs to be and we're all good to
100%.
go. Otherwise, my head is chaos.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the same. I spend 6 to 8 hours minimum in this room, in this small little room by myself, right? If this room isn't organized and clean and all the rest of it, my brain is chaos enough as it is, mate. Like, I can't sit around with more chaos when I've got about 50 voices trying to tell me what to do. It's just madness. So yeah, I agree with you. But the last thing I want to say on this topic before we move on, because I'm conscious of time, relationships, right? As I mentioned when we started, and I've said this countless times on the podcast, I believe that recruitment is all about relationships. And one of the reasons why I think that is that we're not selling mobile phones, we're not selling tech, we're not selling software. We are selling essentially people, right? We are selling people and selling opportunities. And a lady that the episode that just was today, the day is the 29th of April as we're recording, episode that came out today was with Amy Hambleton. She works in legal. Her sales cycles are 3 fucking years. And they're six-figure fees, right? The relationships in her mind are, you have to nurture that relationship on a regular basis, because as soon as they transition and they bring millions and millions of pounds worth of business, that will completely change the shape of that law firm.
Yeah.
But in some other markets, I feel like, and I don't know whether this is a recent thing or if this is echoes from like the cowboy days of recruitment, but I feel like we've almost lost that element of the people side and the relationship side, and people look at that word and go, oh, whatever, you're not going to make money by making relationships, mate. I don't know. That's my little spiel. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion.
So my last business, like, they were so big on relationships, like especially in exec search. It was like relationship, like they were like, before you even start talking business, like, have a conversation with these people, like, have a conversation.
Who are they outside of work?
Yeah.
Like, what can you relate to? What can you bring up in the next time you have a conversation with them? Like, what's going to do that little chip and chip and chip for you to build that relationship?
Because people buy from people they like, don't they? Ultimately, you know. I think I've been quite lucky with the firms that I've worked with, where it has been, I think when I first got into recruitment, it very much was numbers.
Yeah.
But since I've worked for Paul Kelby at Madison Warner, like every business I've worked for since then, it's been all around relationships. So I've been quite lucky in that respect. I do hear horror stories and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's such a mix, because I feel like there is a lot of the generational side of recruitment where it has gone through phases. Like, you've got the transactional side, like what you're talking about there, like it's just very transactionally led, but I always say this, like, this guy I finally based it, not my last company, my one before Orbis. And I had known this guy for probably about 6 or 7 years when I first got into recruitment. And then when I finally placed him at Orbis, I chipped away at him through rec to rec, through my last, like my next internal position, always on his case. And then finally, when I placed him, I was like, that's literally taken me nearly 8 years to place this person. And we still talk now. Like, he's potentially someone that I'm going to send candidates to when I have the right people for him. Like, it is a very relationship led thing. And I don't think we would have been able to have had the success and landing that we have in this market if we didn't have those nurtured relationships. And it's also good as well, because I've always, like, we used to call it the Project 200, but it was like identifying the top people in different companies and staying on top of them and having those relationships. My candidates have then turned into clients and whatever it might be. And I still talk to people now that I spoke to when I was in rec to rec, and like back when I was 21, and that's nearly 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just like, for me, yeah, relationships means a different thing to me in that sense, because I still talk to literally everyone I started off with.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think maybe if I was to play devil's advocate, maybe some people hear that word and think it's quite fluffy, because I know that when I was a 23-year-old recruiter starting in perm recruitment, I was so overly caring and wanted to know everything about this person's life that I'd spend half an hour talking about where their kid is in their judo classes. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, there's an element of building the relationship, finding the commonality. And if there isn't much commonality, showing an interest in their interests to build commonality, but then being commercial enough to then say, right, we've been talking about judo or whatever it is for 5 fucking minutes. I haven't even talked about what I need to talk about. I've called them out the blue. You need to be a little bit commercially savvy in that respect as well, I think.
Yeah. I think, like, I am not every single person I place, but I am friends with a lot of people that I place. Like,
I can't even walk down the street with this girl. Honest to God, when we're in London, like, we've literally just left a meeting and it was, yay, and I was like, what the hell? We go into a WeWork. Oh, okay. And I'm like, honestly, my business partner is my biggest competitor. Like, it's ridiculous.
But it's just years of, like, do you know what? It's years of going to Broadgate Circle, to be honest. And like, when I was at Madison Warner, like, I learned a lot of good things from Kelby. Like, we used to do Madison Warner meetups, so invite loads of recruiters. But like, for my rec to rec, who placed me into my first recruitment, this makes me sound like I've got no other friends. I do have other friends, but like, my rec to rec, she doesn't even work in recruitment anymore, but she placed me into my first recruitment role. She is my best friend and is going to be my maid of honor at my wedding in 2 years' time. Another girl that I placed at JCW is another of my bridesmaids. Another girl that I worked with is another of my bridesmaids. So like, I need to stop befriending people because my wedding party is massive. But yeah, like, you do just, like, genuinely, like, not everyone, like, most of my candidates, like, if they're still in recruitment and I placed them 7 years ago, I still talk to them.
Quick one from me, if you're enjoying today's video, 2 things. First and foremost, like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, all that kind of good stuff. The other thing is, as you probably already know, the way I fund this podcast is through my coaching business. So if you're listening or watching this podcast, you're probably someone that is all about personal development, right? So if you're all about personal development and you want to develop your mindset, you want to develop some real world strategies, or perhaps it's simply just the recruitment aspect. I've been in this industry over 10 years. I've been in the L&D space for over 3 years now, and I'm so passionate about helping people. I feel like this is the purpose that I've been put on this earth for, is to help people in this recruitment industry. So if you're interested in coaching, in training as a recruiter, or perhaps you're a business owner and you want to upskill everyone in the business, take your company to the next level, then why don't you just reach out to me? You can reach out on LinkedIn. All my contact information is on my banner and in my profile, and also on my website. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into today's episode.
Talk to them.
Yeah, I think that's, you've nailed that on the head. But it's just keeping in touch with people, isn't it? It's being human. Like, we work in a human industry, keeping in touch with people regularly. And something that popped up on the podcast I done last week with a guy called Rob Saltrees, he talked about the pendulum of give and take. And he said, what is your give and what is your take? Most people are very much afraid of asking for something on the call and asking for those difficult things, asking for referrals, asking for testimonials, etc. But, you know, what can you actually offer? And like we said at the start of the conversation about speaking to a client, 9 times out of 10, if you start off with product, that opens the door. But if you've got other bits of value about, did you know this business, or in my market, especially companies, there was mergers and acquisitions all the time. So you would call up a business and say, guys, I don't know if you've heard, but so-and-so just got bought by so-and-so. So I've got a relationship with all the sales reps in that business. Do you want to have a conversation with them potentially? I haven't spoken to them yet, but it's market insights, giving something to someone. And I think that little philosophy there is amazing for relationship building.
100%.
Awesome. So I think we kind of touched on this a little bit around different styles work in different markets, and a little bit about rec to rec, what that kind of was like years ago. Why don't you kind of I don't know, why don't you kind of explain to me, because you guys have obviously worked in businesses with different markets and recruited into different markets. Give us a bit of a snapshot then, because I know there's a lot of people there, like especially for when I was a young recruiter, like, is nursing the best market to work in? Should I go in finance? Would I find that quite boring? Is that quite long sales cycles? Like, give us a bit of a snapshot of like what, different styles in different markets and whatnot.
God, I've been so diverse. It's actually scary because I mean, I've recruited across the UK, the US, Europe, APAC, like the Middle East. Like I've worked with loads of different markets and they all have very different styles. Like if you look at the US market, like for a long time it was a very split model. And obviously here in the UK, like we were always traditionally quite 360 led. So when I was then dealing with people, when they'd say they're a full cycle recruiter, I'm thinking, oh, that's the American term for 360. No, it just meant they were full cycle and dealing with the candidates and or whatever it might be. And that was like a huge adjustment. But then working across my core markets, I've worked for big companies that have had multiple brands. Like there was like a tech offering, there was a finance offering, there was maybe like a med tech offering or whatever it might be. And I think there's good markets in all areas, but it's more, I don't know.
Would you say that there are more difficult markets? And when I say that, like I worked with a tech recruitment agency as an external coach for 9 months, and it, like what you were saying earlier, it was very much about getting the jobs because there were a lot of candidates. But if you had a powerhouse candidate, then it would open jobs. But if you had that candidate interview, yes, you would still meet them. But if they had the right credentials and stuff, they're probably going to get the job unless they're an absolute moron. Whereas when I did sales recruitment, and similar to you guys doing rec to rec, you can have someone with unbelievable figures, sounds fantastic, but they meet the hiring manager and go, do you know what? Our customer base just won't like you, mate. I had the same. I interview with people. Yeah. People used to say that I was way too aggressive, and I'm like, right, but I don't agree. I don't work with their customer base, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So do you think there's like more difficult markets, easier markets?
Trade and tech was probably the biggest one for me that I struggled with hiring for, because a lot of the end clients, like they're all obviously a lot older. They're a lot more like picky. It was like for them, it was like you had to come with a candidate database, not a client database. It needs to be a database. And it was very led in the sense of they had to come from a really good uni. They had to come with good credentials. They had to come with like a lot more tick boxes that would impress the clients that they were working with, because obviously within trade and tech and those sort of markets, it's a different ball game. Like you could be placing like 150k like deals and things like that. So it's like, I think that exec search, that trade and tech space, like things like that, like they are trickier markets, and you need to have a solid candidate network to impress clients, and also have a certain flair about yourself. Because of the type of people you're talking to, you need to articulate yourself on the same level as these people. Whereas in other markets, what I've recruited, I'd say.
Yeah, I've only ever worked, like, I'll be honest, like I've never worked with healthcare agencies. I've never worked really with like blue collar construction agencies. Like my bread and butter of recruiters is tech, renewables, finance, life sciences. That's always been my bread and butter. I've never done the healthcare side of things, never hired those type of recruiters, never hired construction. I think in terms of market, like for example, like I remember, so at Opus you've got Opus and then you've got JD Ross Energy, renewables and tech. On tech contracts, they're going to be looking for a very different personality for someone that's going to be doing the German market in renewables, like solar. And that's the thing, it's like you could send them a candidate, it's like, right, they've got 3 years 360 experience, they've got all the billings you're asking for, but if that personality isn't right to go and sit in front of a German CEO, they're probably not going to hire them, in all honesty. And I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah, 100%. I think especially geographically, I learned that the hard way. I transitioned to do the US stuff for a little bit. Had no fucking strategy. Didn't do very well because I got depressed.
I hated the US.
I
Worst
just,
thing
I
I
love
ever
the
did.
US.
it's the hours. I didn't mind if they flew me out to like America. If it was just as easy to go on there, mate, go and work in San Francisco, I would have cleaned up once I had a bit of a strategy. But we were just fucking cold calling. Exactly what you said. We didn't go out to find candidates at all. We didn't even know it was called a resume. It was just chaos. But the Americans loved me because I was high energy, quite well spoken. They called me Chuck as well, which was just a weird but fun thing. But when I did the German market, yeah, like, you know, in America, Charles is like the short term is Chuck, and in the UK, it's more like the short term would be Chaz or Chazers or whatever. But the German market, oh God, as much as like I was blinded by the fees, every single fucking conversation was Charles, please slow down. I can't understand you. And I'm like, okay, I have a fantastic candidate. They're like, oh right, he's selling now. And I'm like, what? And then I see the people that do that market, and then they're like, just fucking monotone, really cool, calm, collected. They're not selling. They're just like talking through their CV, and the client's like, yeah, sounds great. Let's book them in for an interview. And I'm like, yeah, that's me being just not authentic at all. I can't do that. So I just, as much as the UK market, the fees were a lot shitter. I just preferred it, man. I preferred speaking to people in the UK market.
Dan loves the US market. I hate the US market. I absolutely hate it. They're all your best mate, and then they ghost you. They're even worse than London recruiters. And everyone's like, wait, like, why do you only do the London market? I'm like, because maybe this is bad on me. I'm not challenging myself, but I know the London market inside out.
Yeah.
And if it's not broke, like what's the saying? If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I just like doing London, but I have like when I was at Opus, I did the Amsterdam office, which I didn't mind actually. I did Barcelona office, finding French speakers in Barcelona. That was quite tough. Hated Bristol. I absolutely hated the Bristol market because it's so tight there. Everyone knows each other. They're all access free. They all know each other. So if you reach out to someone, they're like, oh, my manager's going to find out. So like Dan loves the US, but I just stick to London. I like it. It's what I know, and it works.
It took me a long time to grasp the US market though, because you do have to kiss a lot of frogs, and you do like they're trained on how to interview. They're trained on a lot of things that we're probably not here, and recruitment as well. Like back when I used to interview trainees when I was at like Next Ventures and stuff, like people knew what recruitment was. Like they either had a family member in it, they were shit hot with all their answers and understood it through and throughout. So then when I've gone to the US, and it's like they thought recruitment was HR, and I was like having to educate people a hell of a lot more, and it was absolutely exhausting, and it was such a process. But I think because I got so used to it and I realized how they work, and obviously I lived out there and I worked across different areas in the US, like I don't know, naturally I've just gravitated towards the US, haven't I? Even though it's given me the most headaches, I'm not gonna lie. But the fees are nicer.
Yeah, that's the one thing. That's the one thing.
I'd rather do more deals and not have to deal with the US market. Like it's just not a bit of me. I like people that are straight talking, to the point, just like you.
You do get some US people though that are like that. Like sometimes they're very passive aggressive. Sorry, US people, I'm not slating any of you in any way, shape, or form. You don't understand sarcasm and you're very passive aggressive, and we all know this. We've all accepted this. So it can, it comes.
But you're good at it. I'd rather do two smaller fees in the UK market than do the US market. I mean, never say never, but it's just not for me.
Yeah. My favorite ever US client was a company called Verifone, and they did like respiratory devices and a urology like ultra scanner device. And they had two sales managers, one from I think Boston and one from San Diego. Both very similar, like your typical like field sales rep from America, super aggressive, high KPIs, work 20 hours a day, sleep when you're dead type mentality. But they paid like 15, 20 grand above market average base salary. And they had an uncapped commission that was 35 grand above market salary, market average. So my LinkedIn advert was, if you want to pay your mortgage off, get in touch. I have an awesome opportunity, which generated fucking so much conversation. And people were like, who is this business? We had them interview in our office, and just what I think it was what you said there, Danny, about how they're just fucking straight talking and to the point. And I loved working with them. Not only like weirdly, we had phenomenal banter. Like they would just grill me to fucking shreds in front of my director and all the rest of it. But they literally, I'd call them up. They'll be like, "What's going on, Chuck?" And I'm like, "Oh, hey man, yeah, I've got a really, really good candidate. Cut the bullshit. Tell me figures, date of employment, name of company." I'm like, "All right, they work for this company."
That's a really good impression. How much have you worked on that?
Oh, years. I could do a lot of impressions, but I probably won't do it on the podcast right now. But yeah, maybe off camera. But yeah, literally, and you book them in for the interviews. They would come in and all the rest of it. But like the fucking cheek of them when we were in the office, and he would sit there and he would like look around the office like that. He's shaking the hands of other recruiters, and just in front of my MD. So how much do you earn? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. And he's like, why are British people so weird about this? Like, it's not like, how much commission have you earned this year? And I'm like, oh, well, you know, I do all right for myself. He was like, it's a nice suit, mate. Did your boss buy that for you? I'm like, yeah. I'll buy you a better suit if you work for me. What's your base salary? 20, 25 grand? I was like, yeah, in and around that. He went, do you want to come work for me? 60K salary. Like, huh? And he was just like, come on, my MD's fucking stood right next to this guy. And he's like, hey,
well, they
buddy,
don't care.
Don't do that. And he went, no, I'm talking to Charles. Charles, what do you think? I was like, no, I'm good. I don't want to do field sales. I'm good. It's like, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. Before we move on as well, last thing I want to talk about on that is something that you guys were both quite passionate about was the differences between rec to rec now and where it was when you first got into it. Now, I've gone on a bloody tangent about how we use Skype and faxes, and most of the newer generation probably has never heard of either of those things. Why don't you just give me a bit of an overview? Like, what was rec to rec like when you first got into it 10 years ago, whenever it was?
Oh my God, it was the heydays. Like, honestly, like, bring back 2018. Yeah, they were, like, I feel really old, but I am 35 on Sunday, to be fair, so I am quite old. But that I remember, like, I could go down to Broadgate Circle on a Thursday night, and I could pick up 5 candidates that night, message them all the next day, you know, and I'd have, you know, like I'd literally just go out, have conversations. I was in London doing rec to rec. I was out all the time, meeting people. Right, it's like, it was unbelievable. It was so much more face to face, interactive, just like human connection, which I find it has gone away from. Even though like Dan and I still meet our candidates, I really do feel like it's shifted. Like the differences, good, this sounds terrible, but like I wouldn't need to send 50 messages a day because I knew I could just get myself down a pub on Thursday night and I'd pick up candidates from it. Don't get me wrong, you still do the traditional, like, you know, for trainees, calling off Indeed, calling the job boards, getting referrals. But you were so well connected. Well, I was anyway. Like, you know, people would be like, oh, do you know what? Go and speak to Kate. Like, you know, I'd get referrals all the time. Like, it just, it was. Now this is the toughest market and I know everyone's saying it, but like, it genuinely is the toughest market you have got to do so much more in order to get that candidate 100%.
And I think because obviously the industry has grown so much as well. There's so many more companies that have opened. Like, it has diluted it a lot more, and like there's a lot of people going after the same like pools of candidates. Like, it's crazy. So everything is saturated now. So like, why do you stand out? Like, what makes you different? Why are people going to do that? And that then goes back to your relationship thing. A lot of the people that we place are actually people that we've known for a while. I've only got a few people that I'm talking to at the moment that are brand new candidates that I've never spoken to before, and it's actually weird for me. It feels weird. Like, I'm like, oh, I've got to start again. But yeah, it's changed dramatically. Like, I remember when I very first got into rec to rec, like my old director just used to tell me to put a pretty picture up of myself and put some posts out on LinkedIn and I'd get traction, which is absolutely horrifying that I actually think about it now. Like, that's so misogynistic. It's disgusting.
Hey, there are some recruitment businesses that, you know, we won't name, but
we're not naming any names here.
There are some consultants with 1 month experience, was a barmaid for 3 years, that get 500 likes per picture. And it's like,
I mean, if it works, it works. Like, fair play. I think the challenge that I found with that was it always drove the wrong attention sometimes. And then you're filtering out even more problems because it's like you're trying to have a professional conversation with someone. But that was back in the day. I don't do that anymore.
Club picture now and again. No, I think, do you know what? I think people do get slated a lot, like putting pictures up on LinkedIn. I'm like, leave these young girls alone. Like, they would, like, I'd put a picture up now and again. I'm like, no one wants to see that anymore. But do you know what I mean? Like, but like, fair play. Like, you're trying to build a brand. Like,
100%.
you know what I mean? Like,
everything is very personal brand led now. Like, you've got to have a voice, you've got to be present on LinkedIn.
100%.
Like, and it is more about showing that you're not just a transactional robot.
Yes.
Like, I am more than just what I'm putting out on LinkedIn about what job I've got and things like that. Like, I personally share a lot of personal stuff, which might annoy people, and I might get the odd person going, oh, she goes again, whatever it might be behind closed doors. But for me, it shows I'm a person, and someone might relate to what I'm saying, and it might bring me someone, which it has done on multiple occasions.
I literally built a brand around Broadgate Circle and Aperol Spritz, I think.
There we go.
Like, back in the day. That was what I built my brand around. Like, you're more personal than me. I'm a bit more like, I don't know. I'm just a bit more like to the point, aren't I?
And you put your banter up and your football.
And I put a lot of that because I'm a big Arsenal fan. You know, and stuff like that. But I think we complement each other well in terms of like what we speak about and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think going back to your point there about like young girls getting into recruitment and, you know, posting pictures that some might say are maybe revealing or maybe, you know, showing the wrong message. Look, if you're confident in yourself and you're confident to deal with, let's face it, the scumbag men, because there's not really many women that are going to then, oh, you look so hot, I want to take you. So it doesn't really happen very often on LinkedIn. It might do, but we often see mainly men that will. And the thing is if you're confident in yourself to then deal with that,
not the woman's problem. And that's it. Do you know what? Like Dan says, and you say, like, you can waste a lot of time, but as you get older, you can sniff him out as well and just be like,
exactly
later.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think yes, it is we've done a lot with these different social media campaigns from different corporate businesses to try and educate some of these toxic males. The reality is that we are hardwired to want to strive towards that thing, and that's just the reality of it. Some of us are more mature to realize that, for example, LinkedIn is not the place to go, you look really cute in that skirt. Like, no, that's not the fucking platform for it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? But unfortunately, there's just going to be a lot of those scumbags out there. And if there are younger female recruiters listening to this, like, if you're confident in yourself, fucking ignore the message. And if it happens more often than not, call them out. Don't blank their name, call them out. Yeah. And then that person will learn their lesson because they're going to get a load of fucking hate. And you haven't even done anything yourself to say you're a scumbag. You just do a screenshot and be like, this was in my DMs today. And everyone, both men and women, will comment on that post, what a fucking scumbag. And you haven't even said anything defamatory about that person. But I think that's actually a good segue, actually, to the second last topic we'll talk about. And I know, Danny, you're very passionate about the D&I topic. So I'll just pass the mic over to you. Like, first and foremost, like, why was this a topic that you were so passionate about bringing up on the podcast?
Think, like, after what I've gone through in the last sort of 12 months, like, I've been very public with a lot of what I've gone through. So beforehand, when I used to look at D&I, like, and I'd work for a business that was very much on the D&I side of things, like, you have your segments of like women in leadership, like how many women are in the business, how many people have to speak different languages, how many people from different cultures, like identification, whatever it might be. But disability wasn't actually really one that came up as often. And it is actually massively neglected. Like, I've got friends that I speak to quite often about this, like, which I could obviously get into in more detail. But I think when it comes to D&I, like, I have such a broad friendship group. Like, it's crazy how diverse my friendship group is. And when we speak often about D&I, it's like, is it a Vanity Fair? Is it a tick box? And what are you actually doing in your business that makes people feel like they are supported and welcome in your business? Because realistically, if you actually ask that question to a lot of them, I guarantee a lot of them might not actually have the answer. Like, for someone like myself, like, I'm a mum, I'm female, and I have a disability. I need a lot of reasonable adjustments. I need a lot of flexibility. I need a lot of understanding. And it was one of the main things that drove me into setting up the business. And obviously Kate is fully aware, like I've said to her, look, there are going to be weeks where you may as well not be able to contact me. I'm probably not going to be able to get out of bed. Like, my condition can completely wipe me out, and God forbid if I need to have any more surgery, I could be out again for another 6 weeks. I'm then not a attractive candidate, let's say. But also, why should I feel guilty? And I think that's another thing as well. There's always a guilt element, whether you're a working mum, whether you have a disability, whether you come from a different type of background. Like, why is there always a justification, and why is there always a form of guilt? We probably provide just as much value. Oh, no.
We're back. Sorry, you were on one there. Go on.
Oh, no.
A little bit funky.
Where did we get to?
you were saying that you provide a lot of value, and then it cut out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, God. But yeah, no, basically, like, it is just a case that we do provide a lot of value. We just come with additional things that people need to be a lot more understanding and adaptive of. And do not get me wrong, like, I will put my hands up here. Like, I do get it from a business perspective. Like, if you've got someone that, say, like, if we put me and somebody else, right, you've got a younger, doesn't have kids, doesn't have a disability, can come in the office every single day, can stay behind, doesn't really have commitments, and you know you're going to get 100% out of them all the time, you would absolutely hire that candidate. And I get it from a business perspective. I really do. But why should I feel any different? When I know that I've got years of experience, I've got years of relationships, I can add so much value, but I can't always be 100%. My son might get sick and I need to look after him. I might have a flare up with my condition and be bedbound and need half a day to be able to get my bearings or dose myself up with lovely medicine and things like that. Like, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting angle to the diversity inclusion conversation, because it's been brought up a few times on the podcast. I've had a whole episode related around that. But your angle, and I love your perspective on it, because there's essentially two options that you can take yourself, right? You can either work with a massive organization that has the foundation, the cash flow and everything to support someone with a disability and with children. You go and work with a startup, right? That needs you there, and the the startup vibe. It's like you work all around the clock, right? Probably not the right thing. Or you can go out and set up a business by yourself or with someone, which is what you've done, right? But there's something else that you said there, and I'm really grateful you brought it up, because there's nothing more annoying for me when the topic of D&I pops up. Have we lost each other again? Are we back? This bloody internet connection. We're back.
Dropped. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we're back. Sorry. I don't know if it's because. Yeah,
that's fine. You went for an absolute tangent and it cut off, and then as soon as I get into a tangent, it cut off. So
I know
it's
typical.
Basically, what I was trying to explain is that when the D&I conversation pops up, I think we mentioned this before we start recording, I get really wound up because I've had people that label me before they've known me as, and again, look, if you guys use this term, whatever, personally, I hate the term cis. I think for me, I find it offensive, right? Don't call me cis. Don't call me white. I'm not fucking white. This is a white t-shirt. It's not the same color as my skin. I'm technically, on paper, I would be classed as mixed race, Cyprus, South Africa, etc. Right? But people see me as white, straight, and they think immediately you're privileged. They have no fucking clue about my upbringing. They have no idea about all the shit that I've been through. But granted, yes, there are elements of the reality and society we live in that I will be more privileged in. I'm not fucking stupid. I'm not arrogant. I understand there are those elements. But when people generalize people and put people into these boxes, like, if I was to sit there and be like, well, you're going to be this way because you're a mum, that's just so rude, in my opinion.
Why is there a categorization? Like, that's where the problem is. And I think just treat it as what it is. Like, nobody needs to be a category. Nobody needs to be a tick box. Nobody needs, like, I'm exactly the same. Like, one of my friends, like, bless her, like, so she's going through a similar situation. She joined a business, was very forthcoming about her situation, and she was recently put into a meeting with HR because they want to bring everyone back into the office. Now, if she doesn't take her drip at a certain time in the day, like, it could actually it's really dangerous for her. Like, she would be hospitalized. She could potentially risk her life. And they've now said to her, well, then how do you fit into our business? Yeah, at the beginning of joining that business, everything was outlined, everything was clear. Now it's a problem because they want to change the makeup of the business. And it's like, again, the guilt factor. It's like, well, so I've got to choose between changing my drip time, completely changing my medical cycle, potentially putting myself at risk because you want me to come into the office more when it wasn't a problem 2 weeks ago. Like, it's, I think things like that. And like with D&I as well, as I said, like, this is just my own personal opinion. So anybody listening to this, like, and this is just conversations that I have with my friends, but I find it quite offensive that it has to be some sort of metric or Vanity Fair, unless you have the data and the proof of what are you doing to make them feel supported and welcome in your business.
You've nailed it on the head. I said this to people before.
It's the best person to share.
Sorry, I get so passionate about this.
Mate, honestly, like I'm probably not as passionate as you, but I'm very passionate about it myself. And
yeah,
I've always said this to people, like, imagine being the trophy hire. Like we've seen this happening in the US, right? With when Trump got shot in the ear, and they had a bunch of the female Secret Service agents. Then the quote diversity hire became viral. And now, unfortunately, any single time they look at a corporate business, largely this is America, echoes in the UK, they go, oh, she must be a diversity hire. And it's like, no, not necessarily, not always. Maybe that person's got a job on merit, but it's because this whole thing got blown up so out of proportion. People are now looking at people and going, oh, they're a diversity hire. Oh, they're a diversity hire. But the reality is, it's like, I said this in my old company. Someone made a joke to me, and they were trying to do something for an award or something, and said, oh, do we have anyone with any disability in the office, or anyone that's got like autism, or, oh, Charles has got ADHD, we'll put him down as a disabled one in the office. And obviously I've got a good banter, right? I turned around and I laughed, but then, you know, sometimes you laugh at something and you go, haha, good one. But then you as the kids would say,
but then you deep it and it's like,
and you're like, actually, no, like I'm confident
funny.
in myself. I can kind of deal with that. But maybe the 20-year-old that's just gone through their ADHD diagnosis, that suffered all their life, that failed school, and now someone said, oh, they're disabled one with ADHD, that can fucking ruin their week. That could really, really affect them. So when that happened, I had to pull up one of the directors and say, mate, you can't be saying shit like that. Oh, you're all right, though. I'm okay, but it's not about me. If you're enjoying the video so far and you want to see some more clips from episodes like this and various other episodes, you need to be following me on TikTok. It's just my name, Charles.Kiriakou. I upload at least 3 to 5 times a week, probably a little bit more than that. So you get to see all the little clips. So if you ever miss an episode, you can see some little clips and some snippets of previous episodes and upcoming episodes as well. So give us a follow over there. And let's get back into the episode. Well, look, guys, we're coming up to the hour mark now, and we've covered an awful lot, to be fair. We've gone through an absolute
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on, and some really, really interesting takes. So as you know, before we wrap up, last question I typically ask people is, following this particular episode, how can viewers and listeners get 1% better in recruitment?
Yeah, I would always revert back to my favorite book of Atomic Habits, and it is that 1% better. But if you just stick with the basics and you follow the basics, everything will come in time. And it's just focusing on that 1%. And I feel like I've gone off on a tangent here. Can I do this again?
Do it again. So that, I think you can probably see Atomic Habits, one of my favorite books, is right behind me there. So like absolutely banging. But so your thing is really about mastering the basics and just
mastering the basics. 100%. So for me, it's mastering the basics and just focusing on that 1% every day, which is the basics, and the rest will come.
Awesome.
I'm going to do this really quickly because I've just had a candidate message me going, the client's not turned up to meet me. So I'm really similar. Oh, you're frozen. Oh, we got you back. I'm really, really similar. Like, I think getting 1% better. The biggest thing I think in how you'll get 1% better, and when I was younger, I had, a lot more of an attitude, and I was definitely really difficult to manage. Listen to people.
100%.
Because they're not, the majority of the time, 99% of the time, people are doing stuff to make you better. They're not just telling you for the sake of it. So I think like listening is really, and I know it's so cliche, but do the basics right, take the feedback, implement that, listen to it, and that's how you'll get 1% better 100% every day.
Nailed it. That's awesome, guys. Cool. So appreciate you guys got to go. In terms of who should reach out to you and how they should reach out to you, what types of people should we put in touch with you, and who, how do they reach you basically?
Message us on LinkedIn, call us, WhatsApp. I love a voice note. Send me a voice note. I send podcast voice notes. But LinkedIn or WhatsApp, best way.
Follow our page, connect with us, and I'm sure we'll bump into some of you in Broadgate Circle at some point.
Love it, guys. Awesome. Well, for people that made it this far, thank you very much for tuning in, and until next week.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, follow, drop a comment on either platform and message me on LinkedIn what your biggest takeaway of today's episode is. If you also feel like somebody else could take some value from this, repost it, share it, tag someone in. If you think you or someone else could be a fantastic guest as well, put them in touch with me or get in touch with me yourself. We're always looking for new guests, and we only really have legends on this, as you can probably tell already. So as I mentioned, like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. It genuinely helps so much, and I've got massive plans for this podcast, and we're loving doing it every step of the way. Keep getting 1% better, everybody. Let me know what your biggest takeaway from today's episode is, and I'll see you next week.